And then Rod Johnson of the SBA, he'll come in toward the second half and he'll talk about the SBA stuff. And then Rod is welcome to jump in as I talk about PPP. And I may jump in and talk to Rod once in a while about the SBA debt relief program. I may jump a little bit in on that when Rod talks about that. So anyway, the next slide, just a reminder on the next slide, SCORE is a free resource that you can tap into, by the way. And we have 10,000 mentors nationwide. It's a free service. We're an extension of the SBA. So reach out. Reach out to a SCORE mentor in your local chapter, wherever you're at, to tap into the resources that we have. Again, free resource. We can help you get through this stuff. These are trying times. Take advantage of the free available mentoring that's available through SCORE. The link at the bottom of the slide will give you a way to actually submit a request and find a mentor you can link up to. So on the next slide, just about a little bit of background about me, and I'll let Rod maybe introduce himself as well. I've been a SCORE mentor for about 5 years. I'm fully retired. I think I've done just about everything in finance you can think of, from bookkeeping, payroll, you name it. And I was more or less a project manager, but I've done just about everything in accounting and finance you can think of. So I'll let Rod maybe introduce himself if he wants.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rod Johnson. I'm with the U.S. Small Business Administration, Washington Metropolitan Area District Office. And we cover Montgomery and Prince George's County in Maryland, Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. My background has actually been spent primarily in commercial lending, with some of the top 5 banks in the U.S. Most of my background has been in middle market and small business lending, but I do have large corporate lending to publicly traded companies in my background. In this particular role, as a lender relations specialist, I have 2 goals. One is to make sure that the banks are lending you money, okay? The second goal is to actually make sure that you guys are getting the assistance that you need, particularly for these 2 programs, okay? And so that's why, SCORE is a resource partner. So you have guys like Matt that you can call upon to either help walk you through applying for draw 1, as they call it, or draw 2, right? And getting the PPP. Or on the other side, as I like to say, then applying for forgiveness, okay? Because that's the real reason why you're getting the PPP, because you're getting a loan and then it's going to be forgiven at the end of the day, okay? So again, my role is to make sure you get money in your hands and then to ensure that you get the free assistance that you need. All right, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Rod. So we'll jump into the content. Let me talk about PPP first. I'm going to use the term PPP 2.0. When I say PPP 2.0, what I'm really talking about is this is version 2 or the second round of PPP. So as I use that term PPP 2.0, I'm talking about this is the second round of PPP. And a lot of you probably got a PPP loan in the first round last year. So now with the second round that's come into play, that you now have an opportunity to get a second draw of the PPP. It's a little different on the second draw. So for example, you can't go over 300 employees. The maximum loan amount is $2 million. And the main thing that you're going to have to demonstrate, and by the way, you need to document this because you're going to have to submit this documentation. So I'm going to harp on that again in a couple of slides. You need to document and demonstrate at least a 25% or greater decline in the gross revenues you got. They use the term gross receipts. Gross receipts is basically sales transactions coming in and getting deposited into your checking account. Okay, basically anything that hits the taxable section of the business tax return, where it says gross income on the business tax return, that essentially is a gross receipts. And you usually prepare your tax return on a cash basis. So whatever method you elect on the tax return cash basis or accrual basis is going to determine how you measure gross receipts. Okay, so you've got to measure that, you got to document that, and that's going to determine whether you qualify for the second draw of the PPP. Okay, Rod, do you want to add anything to that?
Not right now. No,
okay.
Go ahead.
I know we were talking a little bit before about that, about how do we document that, either through QuickBooks. I have people who get a lot of transactions through their PayPal account. You can do a date range on PayPal from, okay, let me do a date range on all my PayPal transactions that came in from January 1st to March 31st. Now let me run it back last year and compare the two. So there are ways to kind of help you document this. This is something you're going to have to do, and I'll harp on this here in a couple of slides. The second thing is, if you're going after a second draw, you have, when you submit the SD form, which stands for second draw form, when you submit that form to the bank and you off on it, it says in print that you definitively are going to spend all of your PPP-1 loan money, okay? So you need to make sure you're going to spend all of your money when you submit that form to the bank, that SD form, that's the second draw form, you're telling the bank, I intend to spend all of the money for my first PPP loan. And some banks are actually asking you to submit for forgiveness before you do your second draw. So, Rod, you want to jump in?
Now, if you're having trouble, if you will, using the first draw or first PPP amount of money, then just go ahead and bonus the money out to your employees. And, you can call it hazard pay or whatever you want to deem it, but just go ahead and bonus that money to show that you've used all of it. Okay.
Yeah, so or give the bank a definitive plan that this is exactly how I'm going to spend the money by February 15th. Let them know definitively what you're going to do. Otherwise, they're going to get antsy about releasing second draw money to you.
Right.
So you need to be, I think everybody needs to be sensitive about that, because some banks are just, they're a little bit pushy about it. They're asking you, you must. Now, technically, you do not, I don't think you have to technically submit for forgiveness because the bank asks you to.
You don't.
You have 10 months. And one reason CPAs like myself are telling people to hold off is because of something called the Employee Retention Tax Credit. And we're anticipating additional guidance on that. And if you're an employer, you want additional guidance on that before you submit for forgiveness. So a lot of CPAs are taking a position that's a little different than the banks on that one. So I just want to point that out for the CPAs that I've been networking with on this issue. And by the way, if you never got a PPP loan and you feel like due to the uncertainty of the economic situation that you're in, and you believe you could use the PPP loan, you can bring people back to payroll and bring them back and maybe ramp the business up, then you should try to get a PPP first draw loan and bring the business back up. Okay, so you're not on the hook for the 25% gross receipt test. You're under the old rules under the first draw. So that's the good news for you people who never actually got a PPP loan. You may want to consider it. Read the instructions. The best place, and I'm going to plug the SBA website because they here's something the SBA did, and I did really well. SBA.gov/PPP. That's all I want you to do. SBA.gov/PPP. And when you do that, what's going to come up is this page. And it's got a nice, beautiful menu. And it says, first draw, drill here. Second draw, drill here. PPP forgiveness, drill here. And it drills down and it gives you all the supporting documentation, FAQs, all the stuff you need depending on what your situation is. So if you need additional information, that's a very good direct way to get information on what situation you're in. Okay, so SBA.gov/PPP, very good menu, very good drill down. That's where I would go if I have additional questions and need to get my hands and arms wrapped around the situation with the PPP loan. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And by the way, the loan amount is, whether it's your first draw, your second draw, whatever, the loan amount's calculated the same. Essentially, it's not any different. It's based on 2019 or 2020 payroll. So you're going to have to get your year-to-date calendar payroll together for 2019 and 2020. And it technically says in the application in the law, you choose 2019 or 2020. Doesn't say lower or higher, but I assume most of you would probably want to choose the higher of the two numbers. I also am going to assume that probably 2020 is not particularly been a good year, and 2019 probably was a better year for you in terms of payroll or profits. So for, I think, a lot of people, your second draw loan probably is going to be the same probably as your 2019. Maybe, maybe not. Your situation may be unique or different. But if you use the same lender and you go back to the 2019 documentation, it may make it a little bit easier for the lender to give you that second draw. But we need to do some additional documentation, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute, okay? If you're a self-employed individual, remember it's going to be Schedule C, which is line 31. Okay, that's the profits for you as a self-employed individual divided by 12 times 2.5. Okay. For people who are dealing with payroll, there is a slight additional change. It's not, I don't know how, it may not be real significant, but I just want to make you aware of the fact with the new legislation, they clarified insurance, and they kind of tended to expand what is insurance that would be included in payroll cost, okay? So if we go back to the first version of PPP, a lot of it is the same, right? It's the gross pay of the individual, which can include all kinds of pay, sick pay, bonus pay, severance pay, whatever it is, the pay that you pay somebody for the whole year, calendar year, 2019 or 2020. In this example, we're using 2020, but it could be 2019. That cannot go above $100,000. Okay, that's in the second column. It says ceiling at $100,000. Then to that, I can add some additional burdens. For example, the employer portion of health insurance. Okay, so that includes dental and vision as well. The portion of retirement. Now, one thing they did expand and change, this is what you need to be aware of. This is a little bit of a subtle change. You can also include employer portion insurance for disability and life insurance. So if you wanted to add that into the equation for payroll costs, you could do that. You can also add in state unemployment attributable to the employee. When you add all those numbers up, let's say for the first employee, number 3, it's on 10,353. That's for the entire year. And we add all that up for all our employees. The total payroll cost is 307,594 divided by 12 times 2.5, loan amount 64,082. Now, let me caution you a little bit here. We also may need to document how we calculate the loan amount. So I think that's going to be, so this slide that I'm showing you at the bottom here, I'm going to come back to it and harp on it a little bit more on another slide. So just pay attention and latch on to this. So let me go to the next slide. There is one business type where when we get our second draw loan and we submit our SDA form, actually, we're not going to multiply it by 2.5. We're going to multiply it by 3.5, and that's NAICS code 72. I'm just going to give a recommendation, a CPA recommendation is this. I don't think it's a good idea to be creative at this point with your NAICS codes. I would recommend you go back, look at what the 6-digit activity code you reported on your business tax return in 2019 and stick with that NAICS code. Okay, so I don't think you should be creative. That activity code that the IRS uses, that they call an activity code, is a NAICS code. So what I'm just politely telling you, it is not difficult for the bank or the SBA to confirm, well, let's just see what his real NAICS code is. So you should go back, make sure you consistently use the NAICS code that you've been reporting on your business tax return. So don't be too creative about this. But if your business tax return has a NAICS code that begins with 72, one way to figure out what your new second draw loan amount is, go back to your loan amount, assuming it was correct, right? Divided by 2.5. That gives me my monthly average. Then I multiply that number by 3.5, and that's going to be my second draw loan amount for you people who are NAICS code 72s per the 6-digit code reported on your 2019 tax return. Okay, so that's my recommendation for the people who are 72 NAICS codes. Anything, Rod? You want to add anything to this?
No, you're
okay.
You're spot on.
Okay, slide. Now, we did see some additional changes with what is covered expenses. Now, it still has to be 60% payroll, but we've expanded what the non-payroll cost can be. So there's been some expansion to that. For example, any back office software that you use in running the business, the PPP loan could conceivably be that expense, okay? The one thing that I think is really useful, and this is the one that I'm really telling my clients to really harp on, is if you have COVID-19 related expenses to reopen the business. We have, like, here, I'm in Montgomery County, Maryland. Okay, let me give you an example. The daycare centers not open unless they retrofit the facilities with things like new restrooms, new this, new that. That's COVID-19 compliance expenses that they incur, reopen. They can't back their people for payroll until they pay for those COVID-19 expenses. So what I'm telling my clients, you need to make sure you use your PP money for some of these COVID-19 expenses so you can reopen the business. So this is something that's now you're eligible to do. If you did not submit for your PPP-1 forgiveness yet, and some of these expenses are within the loan coverage period, and you haven't applied for forgiveness yet, and you didn't get the forgiveness with the covered expenses, then you could conceivably go back and include some of these expenses as well. You need to be, but the other thing you can also do is if you have critical suppliers, if you're under a purchase order or a commitment with a supplier or a vendor to supply you with critical supplies that is part of your business, then you can conceivably use that. You also a restaurant, if it's perishable food that you buy in a restaurant, perishable items do not have to be covered by a purchase order. You can go to a farmer's market where perishable items in the law are exempt from the purchase order documentation requirements. So restaurant owners have a little bit of freedom here to go out and get the food they need. If it's critical to supplying and running your restaurant, the PPP can conceivably help cover that. The last item is property damage coverage, which is basically if the business is stained, some damages, or had to do something to protect itself back in 2020, and the insurance didn't cover it, you could also conceivably include some expenses as well. Rod, anything you want to add to this?
Well, the one thing I wanted to mention was that 60% on payroll. So just remember that if you're a single member LLC or sole proprietor or independent contractor, you can use 100% of the money to pay yourself, okay? You don't have to have the breakdown of 60-40. You can use it all to pay yourself. And in fact, I think it's much easier because you can take that PPP money, put it in a separate account, okay? Write a check off of that account. On that check in the memo section, you would put, payroll and I guess your name in the memo section. Deposit that check into your personal checking account, okay? Now you have the statement that the PPP money was in, and you have the bank statement with the canceled check, okay, from your personal account. So then when it becomes time for forgiveness, you have your documentation, okay, to be able to easily receive 100% loan forgiveness. So I just wanted to, bring that out.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's very easy for self-employed people just to pay themselves and take a withdrawal during the loan coverage period, and that's your ticket to getting to forgiveness. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep going. Next slide. There are some other changes in the rounds, version 2, the round 2 of the PPP. They did modify the S form. So the S form applied to, before it said 50,000 or less, that's now 150,000 or less. So if your loan amount is 150,000 or less, you use the S form. If it's over 150 up to 2 million, you're going to probably use the EZ form. It's assuming that you didn't have reductions in FTEs or salary reductions over 25%. And then over $2 million, if you actually really truly had to reduce FTEs, or you actually did reduce salaries by more than 25%, then you'll use the third long form for forgiveness. By the way, don't forget, there are safe harbor rules that you can look at when it comes to FTE reductions. One of which that a lot of people tend to look at is, if my operations are shut down and I can't bring people back and I had to let them go, that safe harbor rule is one of the ones that I see a lot of people using. Okay. Also, the second thing I'll make a point at, if your loan amount is $50,000 or less, I don't care if you reduce FTEs or salaries, you're exempt from that. Okay. So 50,000 or less, you don't have to worry about it. Okay. It doesn't matter. But if you're over $50,000 all the way up, you do have to kind of pay attention to FTE reductions and reductions of 25% in salary. Again, look to the safe harbor rules to help you get around those issues if you do run into them. And another nice change they made in the law, because before, you remember they said, oh, by the way, when you go to get your loan forgiven, we're going to deduct out the EIDL loan advance. Well, guess what? They're not going to do that now. So that's one reason I was asking people to wait. I said, don't submit for forgiveness. You just wait and see what happens. Now, if they, I guess, Rod, suppose they had their loan forgiven and the bank took the advance out of their loan forgiveness, do they go back to the bank at some point?
All right. So there were two scenarios, right? So the first scenario is you receive the EIDL advance. And I'll use the example of you received a $1,000 EIDL advance. Then you went to the bank and you applied for, well, you got a $100,000 PPP loan. Mm-hmm. So what the bank was supposed to do was to deduct that $10,000 from the PPP. So you would actually have a $90,000 PPP loan. All right, now comes time for forgiveness. The bank says, okay, all the documentation is there. They submit it to the SBA. The SBA says fine. And so now your whole $90,000 PPP loan was forgiven. All right. So all is well under that scenario. That's scenario one. Scenario two, you received your PPP first, okay, for $100,000. Then you went to receive the EIDL advance, but you go for forgiveness. And so you're asking for 100% forgiveness on that $1,000. The SBA, the bank submits it to the SBA. Under the old rule, the SBA said, aha, you had that EIDL advance of $10,000 that was not deducted. So, Mr. Borrower, you're stuck with that $10,000. And the bank would say, you know what, Mr. Borrower, you owe us that $10,000 at 1% over either 2 years or 5 years. Well, now this ruling has actually fixed that. Now, the mechanics of how the SBA is going to, what I call, quote, credit that is yet to come. But as the borrower, you don't have to worry about it. That will be taken care of for you.
So the SBA will be reaching out and the bank is reaching out. So but you should note that that is a change that's good for people who didn't. Yes. If you didn't submit for forgiveness yet, this is going to be a nice thing for people who did. You might want to put that on your to-do list just to check down the road. Another change they made that is good is they're a little more flexible on the loan coverage period. So it made it sound like you had to cover like it had to be either 8 weeks or 24 weeks, 8 weeks or 24. I think there's a lot more flexibility. My understanding, your loan coverage period will begin when the money drops to your bank account, but you decide when it actually ends. Maybe it ends in 9 weeks, 12 weeks, 14 weeks, whatever, but it doesn't have to go all the way to 24 weeks. I would recommend, however, I think it's a good idea maybe sometimes to keep your options open and not do a short period of time, because you don't know what's going to happen during those 24 weeks. So I usually ask people to extend, keep your options open for the duration of time, because you just don't know what's going to happen. But have some flexibility with your loan coverage period. By the way, I don't think if you still have you should have gotten through your 24-week loan coverage period for your first draw by now, but the law does state that it can extend all the way through March 31st. I can't imagine too many people going to March 31st with the 24-week loan coverage period. But again, you've got to get your first draw loan kind of closed out quickly if you want to go after a second draw loan. So that's something you need to think about. And they also there was a lot of talk about the fact that, the PPP loan forgiveness amount is not going to be reported on your business tax return. There are no tax implications on your business tax return regarding your PPP forgiveness, including the fact that, yes, you can deduct in full all of the expenses that you incurred in 2020, even if you used your PPP loan money to pay for that expense. You're still going to deduct all of the expenses on your business tax return, regardless of if you use PPP money or not. Okay, so that also was cleared up. That was an issue that was caused some heartburn for some people who were banking on the fact that they could deduct all of their expenses. Okay, so that's been clarified as well in the new law. So on the next slide, if we can get to that, a few other changes that are good. They did expand the fact that there are some additional organizations that now qualify for the PPP. So if you didn't get the PPP the first time around, now you are eligible for a first draw loan under the version 2 of PPP. Government tourism bureaus, there are broadcasters and radio broadcasts, people like that there are some qualifications, there are some limits that you have to meet. And there's even a provision in the law that talks about a business that's temporarily shut down. And if it's in bankruptcy court and the administrator believes that it can get it back on its feet through a PPP loan, you could conceivably get a first draw loan, but that probably is going to be, you better have a really serious turnaround plan that says we can really bring business back and reopen it, because now we got a new contract. Now suddenly I got a new opportunity. I can bring the business back and bring the people back out of bankruptcy. If that's it is possible. It is potentially possible for some businesses like that. The one thing that, again, I talk about this, I started talking about it at the beginning of the webinar. Let me just dovetail back to it again. Is the interim final rule that was released on the 6th of January kind of reiterates the fact that you are required to produce some specific documentation. Okay, and for example, the 25% drop in revenues or gross receipts, you need to document that. Okay, so, and if your loan amount is $150,000 or less, the bank is going to require that documentation when you submit it at forgiveness. What I'm telling my clients is get the documentation together now. Don't wait for forgiveness, because you're going to have to submit it sooner or later. And if your loan amount's over $50,000, the bank is probably going to request the documentation at the time of loan application. And you're probably going to need to do some documentation regarding how did you come up with the loan amount. Okay, so make sure you get your documentation related to these two calculations, because it specifically is called out in the interim final rule on the 6th of January. So I just want to harp on that a little bit, so people sometimes are ready, so they don't get some pushback from the bank. So I just want to make sure that's real clear to everybody. So on the next slide.
So hold it a minute, Matt. So for the financial documentation, it's important when you're submitting to show that 25% drop, and let's just say it's September 30, 2019 versus September 30, 2020. If those statements are not audited, typically the owner is going to be asked to sign and date that income statement. Okay, so even if a CPA prepares reviewed or compilations for you, you still must sign it and date it. And of course, if you're the one that's printing out the QuickBook interim statements, then you'll have to sign and date those statements. So I wanted to make sure that people understand that they must, if they're not submitting audited financial statements from a CPA, that they will have to sign and date those forms.
Okay, and that's what publicly traded companies have to do. So it's a little bit of what the publicly traded CFOs are required to do too. You have to sign off that you are submitting good numbers to the SBA and the bank. Okay, so thank you, Rod. And now one of the issues that the PPP loan program ran into and the EIDL loan program ran into is that there was a real rush of people coming in and getting these loans very quickly. And they noticed in the statistics and the information that some of the less disadvantaged communities and minority businesses did not really get these loans to the extent that they maybe should have gotten these loans. Okay. So one of the things that they made in the law, and this, they put it into the law for the PPP, and they also put it into the law for the EIDL loan. And Rod will talk about the fact that the EIDL loan actually has some, believe it or not, target grants for these people. And Rod will talk about that in a minute. But they did the same thing with the PPP loan program as well. There's some money literally set aside as kind of targeting people in less disadvantaged communities. Okay, so if you're in the Washington, D.C. area and you live in an area like Hyattsville or Greenbelt, Maryland, or some of these areas, you may want to go talk to maybe a CDFI or maybe a micro lender in your neighborhood or area. Just have a conversation with them, because in many cases they may have actually gotten some money. Like the micro lenders they've got technical assistance grant money now under this program that they didn't have before. So if you're in one of these areas, go find one of these lenders and maybe have a conversation with them about it, because they've actually set aside some money specifically try to reach businesses in these disadvantaged areas. Okay, so this is just something that I won't go through all the statistics and everything. The main takeaway from this slide, and again, Rod will talk about this on the EIDL grant side as well, is they're trying to reach people in disadvantaged areas. Okay, and we'll give you and by the way, there's a guide document that goes with this webinar, and it tells you exactly what is a low income community. And there's a link in that document, and it tells you to go to that website. And what you do is you punch in the address of the business. And when you punch the address of the business in that website, a gray button comes up to the left and it says demographic data. I click on the gray button, a dialog box pops up. I click on the tab that says income. And in the income tab, it will immediately tell me whether I'm in a community, just like that. Boom. It'll tell me is 20% or more of the people in poverty, lesser, and it'll say 25%, 16%. You'll know real quick, just like that, whether you're in a low income community. So if you click the link in the guide and you click that gray button and you click the dialog box, the tab that says income, you'll know real fast you're in a low income community. That's how you figure that out. Okay. So I won't go through the details. I'll keep this moving because we're kind of halfway through the webinar. I want to get to the right section. Let's go to the next slide. And again, the loan application form, you'll need to fill out a loan application form to get the PPP loan. Just a few things that might be useful. I would recommend that when you say the first year the business was in operation, you might want to use the year in which you first filed a business tax return. Use the NAICS code tax return. If you align this information to your tax return, I think that a bit more credibility and solidifies the application process a little bit. Also, when you fill out the lower portion of it, it's a good idea in the instructions. You see this a lot with the best. Even if you're self-employed, just say, I'm going to use this for payroll costs, even though you don't really collect a paycheck. And please at least have one employee where it says number of employees, at least have one employee for yourself, and you're going to collect maybe a withdrawal as payroll costs. So I would definitely check at least payroll costs and put number of employees, at least one for yourself. The application forms are linked at the bottom of this slide. Again, sba.gov/PPP is a very good launch place to get a lot of information on this. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide so I can get to Rod's section. And remember, you got to apply by March 31st now. So if you're going after a second draw loan, or you've never gone and gotten a PPP loan, and this is your first draw, you got to get this in by March 31st. And if you can't find the lender, there's places where you can find the lender. The SBA has a list of lenders. And if worse comes to worse, you could also go to these micro lenders. They call them fintechs. And these fintechs at the bottom of the slide are actually participating in the second round of PPP. So if you have trouble with your current bank and they're not participating, or you don't find somebody, there's ways to figure out. Go find somebody. You got to go out there and get the loan if you qualify for the loan. So with that, I will go to the next slide, and I think we're going to turn it over to Rod at this point.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt. And everyone so that we'll have enough time to answer your questions at the end. I may go through pretty quickly, but I think we will be providing the slides to you, and it'll actually be on the SCORE website. Isn't that right, Matt? Yeah, they can go to the SCORE website and they can print out this presentation. So the EIDL loan program, if you remember, expired the end of last year. So it's ended through the end of this year, 2021, okay? And similar to PPP, the EIDL are now available for those who did not get the loan. So what are the terms? It's still a 30-year term. And let me emphasize, it's a loan. It's not a grant. It's not a forgivable loan. It is a loan for 30 years, which if you know about commercial lending, typically you're not getting a loan for 30 years. All right. So the interest rate is 3.75% for for-profit organizations and 2.75% for not-for-profit organizations. Again, unlike PPP, this is not a forgivable loan. And unlike PPP, you have more flexibility with the expenses. All recurring operating expenses, including regular payments for loans, insurance payments, maintenance, rent, license fees, of course, payroll, utilities, and office cleaning. All right. So unlike PPP, you don't have that 60-40 split, 60 for payroll, 40% for operating expenses. The business must be located in the USA with less than 500 employees and needs operating funds to offset the negative impact of COVID-19, okay? Loan amounts above $25,000 require collateral. Now you may ask, what is that collateral? Typically it's going to be a UCC1 or as they say, a blanket lien on the business assets, okay? The loan payments are deferred 12 months. However, interest is still accruing on the loan. So that's important to know. There are no penalties for prepayment of the loan. Now, the amount of the loan is typically determined by the 2019 gross profits of the business, subject to a maximum loan amount of $150,000. Now, some of you may not have gross profits, so it's going to be calculated on the net profits, okay? Businesses with existing EIDL loans may request an increase, or I call it a reconsideration. And you have the email address there, pdcrecons@sba.gov with the word increase. Make sure you have the word increased in the subject line. Now, here's something to note. If you already applied for EIDL, the advance or the grant is not available, okay? So if you've already applied for EIDL, the advance is not available. It is available on an emergency basis and for targeted companies. All right, next slide, please. Now, businesses must meet a couple of qualifications. Unlike PPP, where you only have to show a 25% reduction in gross revenues, for EIDL, it's a 30% drop in gross revenues as measured over an 8-week period that falls between March 2nd, 2020 to December 31st, 2021, when the program expired, compared to the same dates that fall between January 1, 2019 to March 1st, 2020. Now, I've gotten a lot of questions about the $10,000 grant. So the SBA will issue a maximum grant amount of $10,000 to the applicant. Now, like last time, it is forgivable and does not have to be paid back. Now, to qualify per location, the businesses must be located in a census tract where 20% or more of the population lives in poverty, or the median family income is 80% or less of the statewide or metro area median family income. So you can go to the link below and enter the address in the toolbar, click on the census demographic data button, and click on the income tab and see if you can meet the criteria that I just mentioned. All right, next slide, please. Businesses not in the income community may be eligible for an emergency EIDL grant. So you received an EIDL loan but never received the grant. And there were a lot of people where that happened, okay? You received the grant, but are entitled to a larger amount. So here's what happens. The SBA reserves the right to make sure you qualify, and they will verify your identity. The SBA has 21 days to make payments under this program. And similar to the targeted program, the total budget is limited to $20 billion, okay? So like the first time, the EIDL grant, $20 billion was set aside, and we ran out of that $20 billion. I think it was back in late October of 2020. So now the fund has been replenished with another $20 billion. However, in this round, it must be an emergency. Now it's an emergent loan grant, okay? Whereas before, any business could apply without about whether or not they actually got approved for an EIDL loan, okay? Similar to the PPP forgiveness, the EIDL grants are not reported as taxable income on the business tax return. They never set out to be that anyway. You do not apply, here's the key. You do not apply for EIDL grants online. The SBA, which is really the Office of Disaster Assistance, will contact the applicant directly by email. The Office of Disaster Assistance is expected to start contacting applicants probably in the middle of February, okay? Next slide, please. Because one of the questions I've been getting is, when will the EIDL Advance portal get open so that we can apply as business owners? Well, you just saw it here, that actually the Office of Disaster Assistance actually will be contacting you for that. Now, the debt relief program has been extended, I'm happy to say, through September 3rd, 2021, okay? And it applies to all 7A, 504, and microloans. Now, microloans, they provide operating capital. There are short-term loans that are 6 years or less. There's small loans of $50,000 or less. They're issued in underserved areas. They're normally issued by nonprofit lenders, and technical assistance are usually available. 7A loans, right? You can have a wide range of uses. The biggest one that I like is you can use a 7A program to purchase commercial real estate, okay? But as they say here, operations, new assets, you can be a startup. You have a 10-year term for operations and can be longer for asset acquisitions. So I just mentioned real estate. You can actually have a 25-year fully amortizing loan under the 7A program. Whereas if you were financing a office condo conventionally with a bank, you may have a 25-year amortization, but a 5-year call period or maturity period, okay? And then that loan is due at the end of 5 years, and then you have to refinance. But under the 7A program, it is a straight 25-year repayment period, okay, which is a wonderful thing, and it's a fixed rate, which is great, okay? It's issued by SBA participating banks, and the loan amounts can exceed $2 million. Well, of course, the program goes up to $5 million, okay? The 7A program goes up to $5 million. 504, typically people use this loan to purchase equipment in real estate, all right? But it says here focused on major assets such as buildings and equipment. Can be used to refinance long-term loans. And loan amounts are also up to $5 million. Now, unlike the 7A loan, the 504 loan is actually two loans, right? So if you're purchasing real estate, you have, here's the way it breaks down. The borrower puts in 10%, the Certified Development Corporation, who's basically an agent of the SBA, they're taking on 40% of that debt, and then the bank is taking on 50%. Now, what happens is you're actually making a loan payment to the CDC and to the bank. Now, the CDC goes out into the bond market, they come back, and you can get low rates. So it's a blended rate with the CDC and the bank. And right now, you can probably get a 25-year fixed rate loan at about 2.75 to about % fixed for 25 years. Okay, so I think that's a good deal, and it minimizes the bank. A good place to start is going to the SBA.gov/funding programs/loan. Now, the debt relief, and this is what I like, and it's automatic for existing loans. The SBA pays your loan payments for an existing SBA loan or 6 months for new loans. Okay? Now, this is a wonderful thing. It's automatically done, or it should be automatically done. If not, make sure that you contact your bank to find out if your 7A, 504, or microloan has already been put on the debt relief payment, okay? And it's not taxable to the businesses. Next slide, please. All right, now, effective, well, actually it's effective, I guess, in a week. New loans must be approved before 9/30/2021, like I stated earlier. Or with existing loans are automatically, and that's what I thought they are. All right, so you have 5 additional months available, eight months in total, right? Existing loans for NAICS codes 61, 71, 72, 213, and NAICS codes that would fall under this. So if you're a restaurant, for example, instead of having 3 months, you would have 5 additional months, which totals 8 months of actual payments actually being made on your behalf. And the monthly payment relief is capped at $9 per month. The loan guarantee in the 7A program is increased. And this, this is unheard of. The banks now get a 90% guarantee versus a 75% guarantee for the 7A loan program, okay? And an increase from 50 to 75% for the SBA Express loans, okay? Less than 350,000. Bank have more of an incentive to issue these loans. Now, because of COVID-19, the SBA Express has been actually increased from 350,000 to $1 million, okay? And I think that ends September 30 of this year. Now, 504 loans can be used to refinance real estate owned by the business with no loan fees. That's unheard of, because there are always loan fees when you're refinancing real estate, okay? Or financing real estate, but refinancing real estate, no loan fees. SBA will launch a new 504 Express program with experienced lenders, and there'll be more to come on that. And then payment deferral relief is also available for 7A loans up to 1 year. Also unheard of. Also unheard of. All right, next slide, please. All right, so you have the grant program for live event operators. There's going to be more to come on this. But who are your live event operators? movie theaters, right? Ain't like AMC, concert halls, jazz clubs, Broadway play venues, comedy clubs like the Improv, museums, and other venues that charge ticket admissions for an event. All right, so you must have been operational on February 29, 2020, with less than 500 full-time employees and experienced a 25% reduction in revenue in at least one quarter in 2020. Well, I think most of these live event operators have experienced a 20% reduction. The grant amount is 45% of 2019 annual revenue if existed before 2019, or 6 months of average revenues in 2019 if it existed after January 1st, 2019. You cannot have received a PPP loan after December 26, so basically a month ago, right? December 26, 2020. Grant money is used the same as PPP, but can include marketing, ads, staging, and other event costs. Well, that makes sense because we're talking about live event operators, okay? All right, business coverage period of March 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021. Supplemental grants will be available to extend through June 30, 2020, 50% of the initial grant, okay? If you have questions about eligibility, you can go to the SVOG grant at sba.gov, okay, and get more questions answered. But there'll be more to come on this as as we move forward. Next slide, please. And you have all your other grant programs that are out there. And here are some useful links for you to be able to use to find the money that you need to sustain your business. Go ahead to the next slide. And here are your cross references for the act. And I think, Evan, you actually put this did you actually put this one together? Where it's the pages, it's the page number for the topics. Okay, so for example, the PPP loan coverage is on page 2055. And remember, this is a 5,600 page document, okay? But at least Evan has been nice enough to kind of give you the page numbers with the topic so that you can go right to it to find out the information that you need. This is a very helpful slide. So
yeah, and the actual legislation is included in your handout. So in the upper left corner, you'll punch in the page number. And I would recommend anybody who is an event operator go to page 2124. And let me tell you why you want to do that. The legislation gets into a lot of granularity on this grant program. It talks about who, if you have too many locations by state, you don't qualify. It tells you how much the performer has to get. It tells percentage of revenue has to come from ticket admissions. I mean, this thing gets into a lot of granularity. So anybody, I don't care if you're, think about the people who are arts performance, arts organizations, Blues Alley, I go to Stratmore, all those people qualify, and they can go all the way up to a $10 million grant. What I'm concerned about is this grant program is going to go really fast.
Yes.
So I really think you better read the legislation really carefully and jump on this very fast, because I think because you got some big operators who can qualify, like Kennedy Center. I don't know if maybe Kennedy Center qualifies for this, so there are going to be some very big grant this is going to go. I don't think this budget is going to last real long.
I agree.
Yeah. So just for you event operators, whether you're Blues Alley Jazz Club in Georgetown or whoever I'm talking to, you guys need to jump on this really hard and really fast. Okay. So, but they did, by the way, they did set aside some of the grant money for, you have 50 or less employees. They made sure that they could get in, like they did with the PPP. When they rolled out the PPP, they said, we'll start off with we'll start with the disadvantaged communities first, we go to everybody else. The grant program is kind of going to do the same thing. We'll start with people with 50 or fewer employees first before we go to the AMC theater offices of the world, whoever they are. So just thought I'd point that out. Anyway, we better keep moving and wrap this thing up. And additional help on your, if you, again, like Rod said, the disaster customer service center is the guys that really are going to process the EIDL loan. If you're applying for an EIDL loan the first time around, or if you have questions there. The SBA's got great information. I love the /PPP site. I think that's really wonderful what they did. They organized it really well. They did a great job of drilling down. I think that's wonderful. And then on the right side of the slide is, don't forget there's small business development centers and the Women's Business Center. I in Rockville, Maryland, I talk to them once in a while. The Small Business Development Center in College Park is great. They have a guide that they put out that's really good. So they put out some really good stuff. And SCORE, of course, we have a website for resiliency as well. Yep. And then the next slide, so we can get to your questions. Again, there's 3 handouts with the webinar, not just the slides, but there are 2 guide documents to help you that get into even more detail than the slides and the legislation if you want to punch in the page number and really get into this. And by the way, they did update the forgiveness forms just recently. So, and then when we are, and you know what happens when we put all these money out there, there's going to be some scam artists. So Rod, you want to talk about the scam artists?
Well, there actually have been a lot of scam artists, and unfortunately, it's almost every day I'm reading where people are being scammed, and or money is, the companies have received the PPP money, but they're not using it for the purposes. All right, so I do want to stress that please, for the PPP money, use it for the purpose. Now, do business with recognized lenders only, okay? Please do. And I think we know who the recognized are, the fintechs like what, PayPal and, Lending Tree. And, so we know who the fintechs are. Of course, we know who the community, the money center banks are. We even know who in this area, the DC area, we know who the micro lenders are, WACF and LEDC. Make sure you do business with a recognized lender and avoid people who claim they can get your loan approved faster, okay? And you don't need to be paying anyone any money to do this because you have SCORE, you have the DBC, you have the SBDCs that can actually assist you with filling out the applications and getting the money that you need from the bank, okay? Please do not provide sensitive information to anyone that you don't recognize, okay? Please don't do that. And more importantly, the SBA is not going to be calling you up asking you for account numbers and your social security number or anything else, because I've received calls that, Rod, is this real? Someone says that they've called from the SBA and they're asking my EIN number and other sensitive information. Do not give out sensitive information to people you don't know. Avoid opening email from an address, of course, that is not gov or from your approved PPP lender, okay? So if you see SBA.com, that's a dead giveaway. Or if you see the Treasury.com, then you know it's a dead giveaway, all right? So don't open the emails from addresses that are not .gov. Any request for upfront money, an application fee, I just mentioned it, you don't need to pay an application fee. There is no application fee for the EIDL or PPP, okay? Your approval is guaranteed is also a potential scam because it's not guaranteed, okay? There are forms and things that and documentation that you need to give. You saw the form, right? 2.5 times or 3.5 times if you're a restaurant or in the hospitality industry. EIDL, it's either your gross profits or net profits. Your approval is not guaranteed. All right, so just be careful about that. And then you see the website that you can go to also. All right. So I think that's actually it. And we'll, okay.
Yeah, it just gives you a breakdown of the money.
Okay.
Because sometimes where the money goes tells you something about how the programs are managed, and that's just some additional stuff. And at the very bottom, there is some talk, that we do have a new administration, and they're already, talking about, some new programs. They're not talking about another PPP, by the way. They are talking about a new venture capital fund for startups as part of their program, though. I found that very interesting. So it'll probably be much more targeted, and it probably will not be PPP. So with that, it's now 1:00, so we can now finally take some of your questions.
Well, you fellows have done a good job of attracting questions. I have 65 of them. So let's
there would be.
Yeah, there we go. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to be a little bit selective here because some of these I think have been answered, but can I receive another EIDL loan?
The EIDL loan is actually being targeted to specific, I'll call it underserved areas. So if you're not in that underserved area, the answer is no.
All right. This one's for Rod. May I ask how long does it take to get WOSB certification? I submitted the application in August, but I have 2020, but I've not heard anything back yet.
And I actually don't know. You would have to call the district office and they could actually tell you that. I think it's 202-205-8800 is the telephone number. And oh gosh, the person to speak to is Miriam Eman, because she works at WSOB.
Okay. How does the PPP forgiveness impact overhead rate for government contractors?
Shouldn't have any impact.
Right, I was going to say, I don't think there is any.
No.
Right. There are still banks that have not asked for the forgiveness application for the first round. Now with the second second coming out, how will this forgiveness work?
All right, well, actually, I know the banks were actually waiting for this last form to come out, primarily the 3508S form, because 87% of the $525 billion of PPP money that was put out there last year, as of August, I think it was as of August 10th, 87% of the loans were $150,000 and below, okay? So now we have a form that addresses that. So now banks are more apt to be willing to start accepting more forgiveness applications. And correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but the 3508S is actually 3 pages. The last 2 pages, if I recall, are just instructions on how to complete the first page. So it's really a pretty simple application.
Yeah, and they did it, and the SBA did a really good job of giving you a lot more detailed instructions on all the forms now. They tell you exactly what is a covered expense, what is this, what is that. So their instructions are much better now as well.
Right, now that you've started answering questions, we're going up. We've got 83 open. So, so Rod, this is directed to you. If our lender outsourced the PPP round 1 forgiveness to another firm, but the firm still hasn't updated the latest forgiveness forms updated by the SBA on January 19th, can we share with you the firm that is lagging behind? They've not been replying to several attempts to contact them.
It's a credit union. If it's a credit union or a bank,
You may have lost his connection. But the answer is yes, you can reach out to Rod. He has contacted the banks directly.
All right. A couple related to quarters. Is it a 25% drop in a year or a specific quarter?
You pick whatever calendar quarter you want. And it's
yeah. All right. Are COVID-related grants included in gross receipts?
Probably not, but nonprofits, if you're a nonprofit and you got gross receipts and you get grants as running your programs, that potentially is conceivably part of your gross receipts for a nonprofit.
All right. Are you allowed to apply if you started the business in 2020?
Yeah, well, you have to be probably existence maybe by February 15th. It's possible.
All right. This was from Matt. You previously advised us to wait to seek PPP forgiveness because there was a chance that Congress might pass automatic forgiveness for smaller loans. Is that no longer the case?
Well, my issue is not, I don't think any PPP loan is automatically forgiven. I don't think that's a good term to use. What a lot of certified public accountants are a little bit nervous about is exactly how you elect out wages for PPP loans versus taking something called the employee retention tax credit. For you people who are employers with payroll, you now can take something called the employee retention tax credit, even if you had a PPP loan. But there's a little bit of a question as to how you make that election between ERTC and PPP forgiveness. And some CPAs seem to be telling their clients it might be a good idea to hold off until we get additional guidance, which should be forthcoming from the IRS any day now. I keep checking every day and I haven't seen it. So,
all right. What about small businesses that just started when the pandemic hit? For my business, there are employees to pay to meet PPP requirements. The owners are working and operating the business. What options are available?
So you will have had to have been in business by what, February 15th of what, 2020?
Yeah.
All right. Does the payroll in 2020 include wages made from the CARES Act?
All gross wages paid to a W-2 employee. I'm not sure what from the CARES Act.
I think they're talking about including money from PPP.
Yeah.
Right. Into that's what it sounds like, into the calculation.
Yeah, it sounds like it doesn't matter where the payroll was funded from. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I what they're saying. I just need to know what the wages that you actually pay. If you use PPP money for it, that's fine. I don't care.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just, how much did you pay the person in 2020?
All right. If we are an LLC and give out draws, is that considered the same as payroll?
Technically, for a CPA, you're not an employee, but you're not a W-2 employee. Self-employed means you're not an employee, but you take out withdrawals however you want to take it out. It's your business. You know, there's no rhyme or reason to it.
All right. And does the sole proprietor have an NAICS code?
Every business should have an NAICS,
yes.
wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see. What percentage of the PPP loan can be used for expenses other than payroll, such as operating expenses?
So it'd be 40%.
Okay. I already submitted the application to a lender for PPP2, but only included the actual payroll. From your guidance here, I want to include healthcare and disability. How do I amend the application previously submitted?
So get with the lender real quick. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, don't waste any time on that.
All right. Is the second PPP loan forgivable?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do I need to show my PPP amount on my balance sheet for tax filing? If so, where does it go if it isn't income?
It's not going to, well, if we have a little guide document that goes with the webinar. And what you should do is toward the end of the guide document for PPP, I tell people it wouldn't be a bad idea if you know what your loan forgiveness amount is to get it off the balance sheet so that you don't have a high debt to equity ratio because you're about to take on another loan, or maybe you want to get a debt relief loan or something else, right? So you're trying, or you may want to even sell the business at some point. So tell people, you take a look at toward the end of the PPP guidance document that comes with this webinar, and it tells you the accounting entries you should make.
All right. Is there no limit sole proprietor draws? I thought it was 20,833 or something close to that.
Well, you can withdraw what you think is the IRS is to support your personal life and your personal expenses, But what that person is referring to is, and it's a good point, everybody is capped at $100,000. So you can't, if you got $120,000 of profits on line 31, you can only put down 100,000 divided by 12 times 2.5. So you can only go up to 100,000, and that adds up to 20,833, and that's where they're getting that number from.
Mhm.
All right. I'm the owner of a transportation company in Syracuse. We've been open for 2 years, not operating. We're looking to see programs for startup funds. We're trying to vehicles for the company, which is a non-emergency medical transportation company.
Well, again, Rod talked about the debt. This is a great time to get a new loan, isn't it, Rod? To help you
Yes,
out?
it is. You submit a great business plan with projections, go to your bank or credit union.
All right. What if the business is not in bankruptcy, but the owner is? Will you be able to get the loan?
For PPP, remember the personal credit report is not being pulled, right? There's no personal credit report. There's no collateral. So the bank is not going to know that you're in bankruptcy, because I don't think the application it doesn't. It doesn't ask if the owner or owners have filed or are in bankruptcy. So it's not going to be an issue.
Okay. I am a solopreneur prior to the shutdowns. I was a 1099 contractor in Washington, and I'm currently receiving unemployment from DC. My LLC is in Maryland. Am I eligible to draw PPP for my business in Maryland?
If you qualify for a PPP loan, you can be a 1099 gig worker and get a PPP loan.
All right. Just picking and choosing here. We now have 9 questions.
20 minutes.
There you go. When applying for first draw PPP forgiveness, does documentation have to be on the date of loan receipt, or can the expenditure date be at a later date, for example, 3 weeks after receipt?
Well, you got to document how you spent actual money. Yeah. So if you spent the money starting after 3, because some people probably didn't start spending the money for several weeks, but you definitely need to document how you spent the money when you started spending the money, right?
All right. I have a business and I am the only employee, but I get paid as an independent contractor. How does that change what I put on the application for first draw?
So if you're an independent contractor, you should have got, I assume you get 1099s.
Mm-hmm.
I'll add up all my 1099s. I might not have that much in expenses, right? So that's going to be your basis for figuring out what your PPP loan amount is.
All right. For the EIDL loans, is there a percentage of your gross or net profits that you can receive a loan?
Well, it's capped at 150,000, and the idea was to actually give you 2 months of working capital. So it's, if you have gross profits, yeah, gross profits divided by 12 times 2.5, but the maximum amount is 150,000.
Can I apply for both the EIDL and the PPP loan?
Yeah. Absolutely, you sure can. And we encourage people to do that.
All right. I got my first PPP loan for $13,000 from PNC Bank, and they told me not to apply for forgiveness until I get invited by them. Can I apply for forgiveness through the SBA?
No, you can't apply for forgiveness. The SBA didn't make the loan, so you have to wait until PNC actually accepting loan applications. What a lot of banks are doing so that it doesn't overwhelm their human resources is they are inviting people in needs to apply for the forgiveness. So they'll email you and let you know when they're ready for you to, begin the forgiveness process with.
Okay. The owner's a non-citizen in the USA. Can they apply to PPP or EIDL loan?
U.S. citizen.
Yeah, I don't think so.
That's the short answer. U.S. citizen.
Okay. What is the average turnaround on the micro loan? Submitted an application in early December and they're still looking for documents.
Well, if they're still asking for documents, then until they receive the full loan package, they can't really properly assess your loan request. So that's council moving target until you submit all the information that they need to make a loan decision.
Got it. What is the down payment requirement for a 7A loan?
All right, so let's use the real estate example. So it's only 10%. It's 10% with the 504 program. So with the 7A, you're purchasing a piece of real estate for what, $1 million. You're putting down 10,000. The bank is on the hook for the other 90%.
Okay. I am a single employee LLC in the entertainment business, an actor. I have filled out my Schedule C with the Navy Federal Credit Union, who did not process PPP loans for the first draw. Am I eligible for, and can I apply for the EIDL and a PPP at the same time?
Yes, you can, but actually Navy Federal did participate in the PPP for the first draw, as they're calling it. They did.
All right. I have multiple rental properties financed under the business. I'm looking to refinance these through the SBA. Would I do them individually or all together?
Do you have an LLC that is a single purpose LLC and all the real estate is under that single purpose LLC? Or do you have individual LLCs for each property? And if you have an individual LLC for each property, then yeah, you can refinance them all. Or if you have them all under one LLC, then sure, you can refinance with the bank. Either way, however you have it set up, yes, you can.
How do I find approved lenders in my area?
Just go to sba.gov and I think it's /lenders.
Yeah, it's in the slides, by the way. There's a link in the slides.
Okay. How are the owner's compensation for LLC companies with employees treated by PPP loans 1 and 2?
Well, you can include all payroll. Just remember, they're capped at $100,000 like everybody else.
All right, so I'm just looking through the questions.
Yes, Rod, can they refinance credit card debt in the business name with this SBA debt relief program? Do you know?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I wonder if they could do that, because I got some people trying to refinance their credit card debt. Or if they have a balloon.
You know what,
yeah.
The credit card balances are what? 50, 75,000?
Yeah.
Right? So wouldn't that be, well, actually, if they're 50 or above, then it's going to be an SBA Express.
Okay, so they could, and they can refinance a conventional loan. Suppose they have a balloon payment and I want to refinance a loan with the SBA.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so a balloon payment means you have a real large payment coming due and you just can't make it. So you're up against the wall, right? Or you have an over collateralized loan, which means the collateral is worth more than the loan. Maybe you talk to the SBA, or maybe, what about a real high interest rate, like 6-7% above prime lending rate? Is that too high?
Well, yes. Well, it depends on the loan amount.
Okay.
Yeah, it does depend on the loan amount. Because the smaller the loan, right, the SBA is going to charge a higher rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of how people can refinance some of their debt.
I would use, if it's up to $1 million and they want to do it quickly, then I would go to a bank that, can process the 7A, well, actually process the SBA Express loan, because it's up to $1 million. And the SBA is giving the bank a 75% guarantee.
Okay.
So what's there not to like about that one?
So, and the interest rates are low right now, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to refinance something that's on your balance sheet, you might want to think about that, guys.
Particularly if you have those, because I used to do this, particularly those on-deck loans. So you needed a piece of equipment very quickly, And all you needed to do for On Deck or Cabbage was submit, 6 to 12 months of just bank statements and not financial statements. So you had an interest rate literally of about 36%,
Cool.
where they were automatically withdrawing the money out of the business checking account every Tuesday or Wednesday. All right. I used to love those. And so, okay. You can refinance. You can go to the bank and refinance those, and you probably get a rate of about 6% today.
Yes, and if you look, yeah, you can look. I think if you lower your payments by more than 10%, the SBA will help you out. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is a good time for everybody to think about refinancing their conventional debt.
Right, you keep a track of questions, fellas.
Well, this is a good topic that a lot of people don't pay attention
Oh,
to.
yeah.
I think it's worth bringing up.
Yep. Do I need to use Schedule C because I'm a sole proprietor business when applying for the PP?
And there is a Schedule F for people who are farmers and ranchers as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my business depends on receiving government contracts. I've not been awarded any for the past year. Do I qualify for a PPP loan?
As long as you can show the 25% drop in revenues or 30% for idle, sure.
All right. I was denied the loan the first because of my credit score. If I apply now, how is my chance to get approved?
All right, so I'm assuming that you applied for the idle, and just to be clear, the minimum credit score for idle is 570. So if you have improved your FICO score, it's in the slides. What is it? PDC, and I off the top of my head, but it's in the slides. And you can reapply through that email. But you must go ahead and submit the updated FICO score from Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion to them.
Okay. Somebody said the response to an earlier question wasn't clear. Business is registered after February. Will it be eligible for PPP?
That may be hard. I don't know. You have to check with, yeah.
I don't think so. If it's February 15th, I think they know. It has to be before February 15th, 2020.
Can we draw additional funds from the first PPP loan if we have exhausted the funds already?
So are they asking if they can apply for a second PPP?
I guess. I mean, if the funds are exhausted, I wouldn't think there'd be anything left to withdraw.
That's the whole idea. For PPP2, you're supposed to use all of the funds, right, from PPP1 so that you can move to PPP2. So absolutely, you're fine.
All right. For PPP1, to get forgiveness, you had to submit app within 6 months, but now new forms and procedures. Should we wait until next month for new forms or apply now for forgiveness?
Well, are you going to apply PPP 2.0?
Yeah, I think the new forms are out.
Yeah, the new forms are out, but and Matt, you can correct me. Well, you're going to apply for PPP 2.0, then get that loan and wait for the forgiveness.
Yeah. The only thing that people, if you don't go after your second draw PPP loan, you may want to go back and look at your first draw PPP loan and make sure it wasn't understated. Because in the legislation, there is something that says I can go back and reapply to get the loan amount increased if there is supposedly something wrong with how the calculation was made or something. I read something like that in the law as well. But I don't recommend you do that if you're going after your second draw. But I think people should be aware of that. And if you read the guidance document that is in this webinar, it talks about some of the mistakes people made. And it talks about the corrections that you could make. And it talks about that in the guidance document. That's something that I want to throw that out there for a few people who might not be going after second draw, but got a first draw loan that they're not sure it was correct.
Okay. I'd like to inquire if our company can receive back the unforgiven idle grant amount that we paid before the new legislation was enacted.
Yeah, you'll work with your bank. Your bank will contact you about that. The SBA is going to be working with the banks, and in turn, the bank will work with you.
All right. We received a 170K PPP loan in mid 2020. We will apply for forgiveness in March 2021. Do we submit an exact amount for forgiveness, or do we need to submit more expenses for forgiveness?
You need to be prepared to tell them what the forgiveness amount is. What is it? And document that.
Yeah, it looks like they were not quite at the number, and we're looking if they had to add.
And I tell people sometimes I wouldn't get, some people get so preoccupied with 100% loan forgiveness. I mean, if you end up having a 5-year loan at 1% interest and there's no personal guarantee, it's not the end of the world. So don't get too, try to do what's right for the business and move your business forward, and just get this behind you and move forward. Don't get too hung up on that.
All right. Yeah, the earlier question, Rod, was he says they were all under the same LC, the properties that he was asking about.
Oh, okay. Thank goodness, because, as a lender, it's much easier when they're all under the same LLC to do the cash flow for all the properties to refinance that deal. So yes, I'm very glad to hear that. Very glad to hear that.
Can I apply for a 7A program to purchase a real estate for the company, even though I received an I loan last year?
Received a what?
EIDL loan?
EIDL and PPP last year.
Sure, absolutely.
Can a business go out and acquire real estate? Do they have to occupy the real estate in any way? What's that rule on that?
Yeah, they have to occupy 51% of the leasable space.
Okay, make sure people understand that.
So no, you can't use 7A for investment property.
Got
it. But I have some business owners who actually buy a building and put their business in it, occupy the building, and then lease out some of the other space.
As long as they occupy 51% of it.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody understands that. So, because this is a good time to get, interest rates are low. I got some business talking about they want to go a location for their business and maybe lease out some of the space. Okay, here's a good opportunity to do it. He just told you the rule, guys.
Right.
And that's even for, and let me take it one more step. That's even for mixed use properties. Okay. So let me give you an example. You have the bottom floor is retail. Mm-hmm. And then upstairs you have 2 apartments that you could either live in or lease out. Well, as long as the retail, and I'll just use Allstate. So if you have an Allstate agency on the first floor, it occupies 51% of the space, it counts. And then you can lease out the other 2 units upstairs, okay?
Yeah, so this is a good time to think about, a few business owners thinking about doing that.
All right, we have time for a couple, 2 or more questions. Can you please elaborate on the fees being waived on the 504 and 7A loan programs? I heard the SBA guarantee fee is discounted on 504. The participation fee is waived. Can you please elaborate on each loan?
I was getting ready to say the participation, that fee is gone, right? That fee is gone. On the 7A, the 3% or 3.5%, depending on the size of the loan, that's gone. Normally you can finance that within the loan, but now you don't have to worry about that.
Okay. Our C Corp startup ran out of invested funds, so our 3 founders have been working for $0 since 2018. Therefore, we have no payroll, no W-2s, and have been told by our bank that we cannot apply for PPP. They have several excellent revenue opportunities. Do they have any opportunity there?
Yeah, you don't have any payroll. Do you have any payroll from 2019? Can you go back to 2019 and select that year?
Yeah, it sounds like
probably what you need to do, because your 2020 is a bust.
Okay. Let's look for 1 or 2 more and then we can wrap up. My first round PPP was deposited to my personal account. Should I have transferred it to a business account in order to keep a better record? How can I reconcile at this point?
Well, I guess now you just have to keep incredible records to be able to segregate out, right, the PPP money and how it was used. So now, let's just say you use Comcast for your internet and Comcast for, your business phone. And, so now you're going to need those invoices, your receipts, right, a copy of the receipts to show that you've paid those invoices, the canceled checks, okay, as well as the bank statement that shows that, you use that account to actually pay the expenses. Now, really, that money should have gone into your business checking account. I don't know if for PPP or EIDL. I'm actually surprised because I know for EIDL, they actually check to make sure that it's the business checking account. If it's not, they withhold funds until they receive the proper routing number and account number for the business checking account. So I'm kind of surprised to actually hear that happened.
Okay.
I guess one slipped through the cracks.
There we go. And we'll do one final question. You've had lots of kudos come in, so thank you, gentlemen. We touch on the 6-month SBA payment assistance question.
The debt relief, where they get up to actually 8 months if they're a restaurant, or 6 months if it's a brand new, I guess it's a brand new loan. I mean, the loan needs to be approved by, September 30, 2021. Between now and then, you have the opportunity to apply for the 7A loan, and I'll use the real estate example again, to go out and buy some real estate, okay, put 10% down, and have that thing closed between now and September 30, 2021, which, it can be. So, and the SBA is going to pay the first 6 months of and interest on that loan for you. Oh my gosh.
It's good. Yeah, so we'll end on a nice note there.
I'm going to ask one last one that just came in because I think it's kind of an interesting question. Escape room be considered for shuttered view operators grant?
You got to pay a ticket to get in, and it's to pay the performing artist, right? So it can't be Starbucks and a guy sitting on a stool playing a guitar and walking into Starbucks. That's not going to get it.
Yeah. Like an escape room probably wouldn't, but they know where to go in the document thanks to your slide.
Yeah, read the doc. The document is very specific on that one, really.
All righty. Well, we're a little over 1:30, gentlemen. You've done a terrific job. So thanks so much. And thanks everybody for attending.
Yeah, we thoroughly enjoyed doing this. We really did.
Yeah, it was good. We learned a little bit ourselves, So thanks again.
Thanks again.
Okay, we'll